Right now, there is a very important situation developing behind the scenes in Philadelphia, and if you're an Eagles fan paying close attention to the start of the NFL's free agency window, this is the kind of story that could shape the entire direction of Vic Fangio's defense moving forward. The Philadelphia Eagles are reportedly making significant progress toward a new contract with outside linebacker Jalen Phillips, and there is growing optimism that a deal could be finalized before he even reaches the open market. According to NFL insider Ian Rappaport, conversations between the Eagles and Phillips have advanced considerably in recent days. Nothing has been officially signed yet, and no final decision has been made, but there is a clear sense that both sides are working seriously toward keeping him in Philadelphia. From the Eagles' perspective, there is a strong reason why they want to get this done, and a lot of that has to do with defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. Rappaport reported that Fangio is a huge fan of Phillips, and that his presence in Philadelphia is one of the reasons why this partnership has worked so well. That detail matters because when a coordinator strongly believes in a player, teams often make it a priority to keep that piece in the system. In Fangio's defense, edge rushers are critical to creating pressure without constantly relying on blitzes, and Phillips has clearly earned respect within the organization. At the same time, the situation isn't simple. NFL insider Jordan Schultz has also reported that the Eagles remain very interested in bringing Phillips back, but negotiations are expected to continue and possibly intensify as the free agency window approaches. And here's the key challenge. Phillips is expected to have a very strong market if he actually reaches free agency. Multiple teams around the league are believed to be ready to spend aggressively on pass rushers, especially in a free agent class that isn't considered particularly deep at the position. That market dynamic could push Phillips's price significantly higher. Another report from Jeremy Fowler indicated that people around the league believe the Eagles are attempting to re-sign Phillips to a contract that would pay him well above $20 million per year. And when you start talking about numbers like that, you're entering the territory of elite edge rusher contracts. In fact, there has even been discussion that Phillips could command as much as $27 million per year, which would place him among the 10 highest paid edge rushers in the entire NFL. For the Eagles front office, this creates a delicate balancing act. On one side, they clearly value Phillips and recognize his role in the defense. On the other side, they can't simply write a blank check. The organization has to evaluate whether that kind of financial commitment makes sense within the broader roster structure. The team has other important decisions coming, and every major contract affects the rest of the roster. Another important factor here is timing. The NFL's negotiating window officially opened at 12 noon Eastern on March 9th, which means teams can now begin formal discussions with upcoming free agents. If Phillips reaches that stage without a deal in place, the competition could increase quickly. Teams with available cap space might drive the price even higher, making it much harder for the Eagles to keep him. And if Philadelphia does lose him, the impact on the depth chart could be significant. Without Phillips, the Eagles would be looking at a much thinner group of edge rushers. The current options would include Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, and Jose Ramirez, which would create a major need for additional pass rushing help. That's why keeping Phillips could effectively serve as the Eagles' biggest move of the offseason, similar to how the team focused on retaining key talent rather than making multiple splash signings in previous years. There's also another layer to this situation that Eagles fans should keep in mind. If the team commits a large contract to Phillips, it could influence other roster decisions. Reports indicate that a major deal might make it more likely that impending free agents like Dallas Goedert, Reed Blankenship, and Nakobe Dean end up finding new homes elsewhere in the NFL. That's the reality of roster construction in today's league. Every big contract forces difficult choices somewhere else. So right now, the clock is ticking for Philadelphia. Negotiations are progressing, optimism exists, but nothing is finalized yet. The Eagles are clearly trying to get this deal done before the market explodes, while Phillips and his representatives know that waiting could increase his value dramatically. The question now becomes whether both sides can find that number that works for everyone before another team steps in with a massive offer. So let me ask you this as an Eagles fan watching this situation unfold. If Jalen Phillips really commands something close to $25 to $27 million per year, do you think the Eagles should pay that price to keep him in Vic Fangio's defense? Or would you rather see the team invest that money somewhere else on the roster? But this is where the situation becomes even more interesting when you really start looking at the bigger picture of what the Philadelphia Eagles are trying to accomplish with their roster this offseason, because bringing Jalen Phillips back isn't just about one player. It's about how the entire defensive structure under Vic Fangio could look moving forward, and how the front office plans to allocate its financial resources across multiple positions. If the Eagles do finalize a contract with Phillips that lands somewhere above $20 million per year, it would immediately signal that the organization views him as a cornerstone piece of the pass rush. That type of investment isn't made lightly. When a team commits that level of money to an edge rusher, it usually means they believe that player can consistently impact games, collapse pockets, and create pressure against the best offensive lines in the league. And remember, Fangio's defensive philosophy heavily relies on the front four generating pressure without needing to blitz constantly. That's one of the defining traits of his system. The idea is to keep 7 players in coverage while still disrupting the quarterback. For that strategy to work effectively, the edge rushers have to win their matchups. They have to be players that offenses genuinely worry about every single week. That's why the interest in keeping Phillips in Philadelphia has been so strong internally. There's clearly a belief that he fits what Fangio wants to build defensively. And when a coordinator strongly believes in a player, that opinion carries real weight in roster decisions. But at the same time, the Eagles front office also knows that they cannot build the roster around one position alone. If the number truly approaches the $27 million range that has been mentioned in league circles, the team will have to ask a very tough question. Is that price sustainable when other parts of the roster may also need attention? Because as we mentioned earlier, committing a large contract to Phillips could trigger a ripple effect across the roster. Players like Dallas Goedert, Reed Blankenship, and Nakobe Dean are all part of the conversation when it comes to upcoming contract situations and future roster planning. In today's NFL salary cap environment, big decisions are rarely isolated. One major contract almost always leads to another difficult decision somewhere else. That's what makes this moment so critical for Philadelphia. The front office is trying to move quickly because they know what happens if Phillips actually reaches the open market. Teams around the league are entering free agency with significant cap space, and edge rushers are always one of the most sought after positions. If multiple teams begin bidding, the price could rise quickly beyond what the Eagles originally intended to pay, and once that happens, bringing him back becomes much more complicated. At the same time, letting him walk would create its own problem. The current depth chart at edge rusher would suddenly look very thin, leaving players like Jalex Hunt, Nolan Smith, and Jose Ramirez as the primary options at the position. That would likely force the Eagles to pivot quickly toward other pass rushing options in free agency, or possibly even the draft, and that's the scenario the front office is probably trying to avoid right now. From a strategic standpoint, keeping Phillips would provide stability at one of the most important positions on the defense. It would allow Fangio to continue building the system with a player he clearly believes in, while also preventing a major hole from opening up on the roster right before the offseason truly begins. But until a contract is actually signed, nothing is guaranteed. Negotiations in the NFL can move quickly, especially when the free agency window opens. Deals can be finalized within hours, but situations can also change just as fast if another team presents a more aggressive offer. That's why the next stretch of time is going to be incredibly important for the Eagles. The organization is clearly working to reach an agreement. There is optimism that something can get done, but the clock is still ticking and the market is waiting, and Eagles fans are watching very closely to see how this story ends. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Eagles should prioritize keeping Jalen Phillips even if the contract climbs close to that $27 million per year range? Or would you rather see the team use that money to strengthen multiple areas of the roster instead? And there is another angle to this story that Eagles fans should really think about, because when you look closely at how this front office usually operates, you start to realize that the situation with Jalen Phillips might also tell us something about the strategy the team is planning for the rest of the offseason. The Philadelphia Eagles, under Howie Roseman, have always been a team that tries to stay aggressive but calculated at the same time. They are willing to spend big money when they believe a player fits their system and their long-term vision, but they also try to avoid deals that could limit their flexibility in the future. That's exactly why this negotiation with Phillips has reached such a critical stage. If the Eagles were completely comfortable paying any price to keep him, the deal likely would have already been finalized. The fact that negotiations are still ongoing suggests that both sides are working to find the number that makes sense for everyone involved. From Phillips's perspective, entering free agency could dramatically increase his leverage. From the Eagles' perspective, finalizing the deal now could prevent a bidding war that pushes the contract even higher. And that's where timing becomes everything. The free agency negotiating window opens the door for teams across the league to start calling agents, exploring options, and preparing major offers. Pass rushers are one of the most valuable commodities in the NFL today, and teams that feel they are just one defensive piece away from competing will often spend aggressively at this position. That's exactly why the Eagles have been pushing to keep the conversation moving with Phillips. They know that once the market opens fully, the situation becomes much harder to control. A team with significant cap space could step in, present a massive offer, and completely change the dynamic of the negotiation within minutes. But there's also something important to remember here from the Eagles' side. This front office always prepares contingency plans. If a deal cannot be reached with Phillips at a price they consider reasonable, the team will not simply panic, they will pivot. That could mean exploring other pass rushers on the market, evaluating potential trade opportunities, or relying on younger players already on the roster to step into larger roles. Still, none of those alternatives would provide the same level of stability as keeping Phillips in the system. Continuity matters, especially in a defense that is still evolving under Vic Fangio. When a coordinator builds a scheme around certain player strengths, losing one of those pieces forces adjustments that can take time to correct. Keeping Phillips would allow the Eagles to move forward without needing to redesign parts of the defensive approach. And that's why this negotiation is so much bigger than just a single contract number. It's about identity. It's about whether the Eagles want to double down on a defensive structure that relies on strong edge pressure, or whether they are willing to take the risk of reshaping that group if the financial demands climb too high. Right now, there is optimism that a deal can get done. Progress has been made. Both sides are talking seriously, but in the NFL, optimism does not guarantee a contract. Until the signatures are on paper, every possibility remains on the table. So as Eagles fans continue watching this situation unfold, one thing is clear: the next decision made by this front office could shape the direction of the defense for years to come. Now, I really want to hear your thoughts about this entire situation. If you were making the decision for the Eagles, would you lock in Jalen Phillips now with a major contract to secure the pass rush, or would you take the risk of letting him test the market and potentially use that money to strengthen other parts of the roster? Another thing that makes this moment fascinating for Eagles fans is how closely this decision reflects the philosophy of roster building in today's NFL. Teams constantly talk about building through the trenches, and when you look at successful defenses across the league, one pattern appears again and again. Consistent pressure on the quarterback changes everything. That's why edge rushers are among the highest paid players in football. So when the Philadelphia Eagles weigh a potential deal that could exceed $20 million per year for Jalen Phillips, they're not just evaluating one player's performance. They're evaluating how valuable that pressure really is to the structure of the defense Vic Fangio is building. If the Eagles bring Phillips back, the message is clear. They believe the pass rush must remain one of the defining strengths of this defense. Fangio's scheme depends heavily on the front four generating disruption without constantly sending extra blitzers. When that works, it allows the secondary to stay disciplined in coverage, it forces quarterbacks to make rushed decisions, and it creates opportunities for turnovers. That's the ideal version of the defense the Eagles